Court, and sometimes the Supreme Court would side with the states, and other times it would side with the federal government, probably the federal government more than not. One of the things they look at when they make decisions is precedent. And if this state or most states have always done something, it is hard for the national government to come in and say, oh, we're going to start doing this now. Supreme Court will say, hey, you haven't been doing this. You just can't jump in and do something you never really done before. But sometimes, current events, some things are different with the current situation. Some people want to meet religious activities and gather in groups. A state might say you can't do that or you can do that. And the federal government might come in and say you can do that or can't do that. And then that falls under freedom of religion and the First Amendment. States might have different views on that versus the national government. If you're going to, some preachers have actually been arrested by usually the states, but what if they weren't? Would the national government come in and step in and do what they feel is appropriate? So this elastic clause is cause for concern for mostly the states, that the federal government oversteps its boundaries with the excuse that it's necessary and proper for them to actually function as a government and get things done. Committees, quickly, that is whenever we have laws, it goes to committee. If it's a banking bill, it will go to the finance committee. It will be discussed, and if it goes through there, go to the House. The Senate will also have a financial committee that will discuss the bill and come up with its version. Then the two versions will meet and they'll form a new committee between the two House and Senate committees to hammer out so that the bill is the same, and the House will vote on it, the Senate will vote on it, and if it passes, then it goes to the president. So there's a lot of committees that have to meet and hammer things out. And we hope that they're doing this in a bipartisan fashion, but that doesn't always happen. All right, executive branch, we know you got the president and vice president. One thing that most people are not familiar with is that piece where the vice president is the president of the Senate. And John Adams was the first one, and he was probably the most active as president of the Senate. But once parties were established to have a vice president show up in the Senate to try to run the meetings, if he's in a different party, you can start throwing chairs and stuff. So sometimes the vice president has at times never even gone to the Senate to do his responsibility as president of the Senate. And the unique part is that if there's a tie in the Senate to pass a bill, the vice president can go down there and gets the vote if there is a tie. So if it's 50-50, Mike Pence could go down there and vote in favor of a bill, and then it would pass 51-50. It's the only time he gets to vote in the Senate, part of his position as president of the Senate. All right, electing the president again, looking at the Electoral College, and you need 271 electoral votes to become president. You basically could win the 5 biggest states and pretty much become president just on California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania, Illinois. You pretty much would have it in the bag. But you need 271 electoral votes to become president. In other cases, there's been situations where we haven't had a clear winner in the Electoral College. One time was the election of 1800. President Jefferson and his vice president running mate tied because they didn't stipulate vice president or president on the ballot. So they kept tying. And eventually, after 36 votes, it was finally given to Thomas Jefferson, and then Aaron Burr became his vice president. And they then didn't like each other for the rest of the time after that. Another time was 1824, this time dealing with John Adams' son, John Quincy Adams. He didn't win the popular vote. Andrew Jackson did and had the majority, the most electoral votes, but the vote went into the House of Representatives. If there's no electoral winner, a majority winner, then it goes to the House of Representatives, and then each state gets one vote. So California, instead of having 55 electoral votes, they go down to one vote. Vermont, New England, Connecticut, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, they would all have one vote. So then whoever was able to get 26 votes in the House of Representatives would then become president. Conversely, for vice president, that is chosen by the Senate if someone doesn't have a majority of the Electoral College. So in this scenario, it could be where the House of Representatives picks a Democrat to be president, and then the Senate could choose a Republican to be vice president. So you can imagine how much fun they would have working together, a Democrat president and a Republican vice president. All right. So then last thing is the court system, federal court system. You got the Supreme Court, the 9 members there. John Roberts is the Chief Justice. You have appeals court. There are 12 appeals court, circuit courts, and then 94 district courts. And you would start at the local level, move up to the district, and then appeals court. And the appeals court is right under Supreme Court. They make decisions, and the Supreme Court can only hear up to 100 cases a year. That's a lot of work for the 9 people on there to do 100 cases. So not every case, even though somebody wants to appeal it, the Supreme Court could reject the appeal. All right, we already talked about checks and balances. And one of them is impeachment, which Donald Trump recently impeached. It means he then goes to trial, and his trial in the Senate found not guilty, not removed from office. Third time in history. Bill Clinton impeached, gone to trial, found not guilty, stayed in office. And then Andrew Johnson, after the Civil War in 1868, impeached, brought to trial, found not guilty by one vote. So that's happened 3 times. And then, of course, Richard Nixon, who resigned because he knew he was going to get removed from office. All right, so what are we doing? Just to summarize, that should be done. You can then take the quiz and use your book, use your information that you have here. Not a problem. Then you have the map mystery about shifting power in the House. This is from 2000 census. And then, like I said, there are some states that are losing population currently, and the Electoral College is going to shift. It seems still to the south, and maybe not to the west as much, but to the south. All right, so you stay healthy and be safe and enjoy your weekend. And I'll see you on Tuesday, and we'll be talking about Section 3. Adios.